Is it time for recess yet? I'm so glad you found time to join us here on the Childcare Director's Chair, where Erica Saccoccio shares her best practices that she's refined through her passion of directing childcare centers over the last 23 years. From parenting interaction, systems to save you time, money, and stress, to profitability. She shares it all from the Childcare Director's Chair.
Hey guys, welcome to the Childcare Director's Chair podcast. I'm your host, Erica Saccoccio. If this is your first time tuning into our show, I'd like to say welcome. And I'd also like to say thank you to all of our listeners who tune in day after day. I have to give a special shout out to our listeners in Texas, Maryland, Wisconsin, Montana, and Ohio. You guys are showing up in record numbers, so I super appreciate that. And I also want to say hello to our friends and listeners in Canada. You guys are the support that we've had for our show, so thank you so much. And some really cool news. We have some podcasters that are in the ECE space from Canada that are going to be on our show next month. So I love all the love that we're getting from Canada as well. And I hope that you've been able to tune into a few of our other episodes where we've had some great guests. We've had Lizette from Diapers to Destiny. We've had Daniel from Your Review. And then we had Adrian from thrivingchildcare.com. And today's guest, no different, amazing guest. So we have with us today Cindy Lehnhoff, the director of the National Child Care Association. So welcome to the show, Cindy.
Thank you, Erica, for having me, and hello to all of your hardworking and essential listeners.
Thank you. So tell folks a little bit about your organization.
We are the voice of the private child care providers throughout the United States. At the federal level, we have several agencies at the federal level that we partner with so that we are in sync with our voice to try to leverage a little more attention in Congress than they like to give us. And we also work really hard at getting our members and beyond invited into advocacy and also joining us in emailing, calling, visiting their legislators because we need more voice. We also offer monthly professional development webinars. We just had a fabulous leadership conference for directors and owners in Austin, Texas. We also have a monthly advocacy call with the Early Education Consortium in Washington, D.C., which is another voice for private providers. Because what we believe is if we take care of the providers and the educators, then they will be able to take care of the children and their parents and actually their staff, because that you got to take care of staff.
Yes.
So that's a little bit about us.
Okay. So I strongly believe in advocacy. I am a board member of my NACI state affiliate here in Rhode Island. And I love advocacy. So thank you for all the work that you are doing up on the federal level. And gosh knows we need it right now. So thank you so much. Everything is changing so quickly. I've been in the field for, 26 years. Yeah, things have changed a lot in the last 5 years. So good though, some good, right? There's more now happening around childcare than ever. So that's good, right? At least the conversations are happening.
And we need to keep talking.
We do. We need to.
Because I think that they're waiting for us to go silent. Yeah. And we're not going to do that.
We can't.
No.
There'll be no childcare.
Mm-hmm.
So with that, today we are going to talk about equality in your program and how do we do that? Because right now some programs might be thinking, I'm not even really thinking about quality because I'm still trying to figure out how to stay open, right? They're trying to make things all work together. Let's talk a little bit about the benefits of creating a culture of continuous improvement in a childcare setting.
Absolutely, because we don't want to walk backwards in quality. I've been in the industry 44 years, and I was a teacher, a district manager, a divisional director, a cook, a bus driver, you name it. I've done it. In my last 7 years, I had the opportunity to step into a divisional vice president role. And one of my passions is getting schools nationally accredited. because it's not so much about being accredited, it's about the journey that you take to get accredited. And it is so eye-opening to when you take that journey, what you learn about yourself, the educators that work with you, and ultimately, how to come together so that that quality is set in place and then hopefully set in stone. And I always used to say to directors that I supported through the journey, um, that it's one thing to get accredited, and then you have to live accreditation.
Yeah. So I 100% want to support that message. So my team and I, several years ago, we went through the after school accreditation through the National After School Association. And I agree that by the end of all of that work that we had put in, the teachers, the family, even the children, because they were school age, they had a big impact on the decisions that we were making in the center.
Mhm.
When we were done, before our visit, we all kind of looked at each other and said, whether we received that paper or not, we felt so good about the work that we had done. We had validated ourselves. Now, I will happily say we were actually the first after school program accredited in my state from the National After School Association. But you're right. It really is that journey and that always continually working towards quality. So I firmly believe in those benefits. And I think that it's something right now where maybe if a program is struggling with like retaining staff, that's a little piece of it is helping staff understand they're part of the bigger picture in your program. That what they contribute to the program really matters. And so that's a great way to do that is to talk to them about the quality that you have in your program and why it's so important and their piece in it.
One of the things that I used to do with my teams, and I took several teams of directors through accreditation and then reaccreditation, and it accumulated to about 100 schools
Wow.
over about a 10-year period. One of the things that we used to start out by reading the standards that we had to meet. And then we would highlight the standards we were already meeting. It can be overwhelming, to look at the standards and think, oh, how can I ever, fulfill those requirements? But so often you were already 3/4 of the way there.
Yeah.
And then you just had to say, okay, how do we break this down? And you have to include them. They have to be part of the solution for anything that you're not meeting. You have to make sure they understand the vision and the why behind it, and then hold them accountable for a job they can be proud of, because that's what you just pointed out was how you felt. I always said that when a team of directors came through, because I used to take like 6 or 7 through at a time in a demographic area, and I used to say, they walked taller. I swear to you, they walked taller.
Stay with us. We'll be right back.
And so used to having everything in front of them right away that we forget that innovation just takes time. I myself, I get frustrated too. Why? And this as being one of my best friends is, hey, I talk to you all the time. Hey, man, I'm frustrated in the fact that I can't seem to just get there in the next day. But that's just not how these things work, right? Innovation needs to be planned out. It needs to be very methodical. And then when it finally hits, that's when it seems like to everyone else that it sort of just came out of nowhere. But to you, the amount of dedication that it took over that time.
Yeah. And I think it's so important. So since you've worked with so many schools, and there's so many directors that listen to our show, how can you, or what guidance would you give them in terms of how they can effectively communicate this importance of quality to their staff?
Well, I think first of all, you always have to be the example. And that means you do have to manage by walking around. You have to be on your floor, seeing what's happening and recognizing the things that are going well. And of course, one of the things that I learned years ago as a director was you have to live licensing. I lived in a state and I worked in a state where they made 3 unannounced visits a year. And not every state does that. So and then if a complaint by some chance went to licensing, then you got another visit.
Sure. Yeah.
And so you had to constantly walk through, and you had to constantly coach people into compliance, which is your first, step into quality. Licensing is minimum health and safety. And then if you work in a state that has quality rating initiatives, which can include accreditation, or it may just be the state's, quality rating initiative, you have to be on the floor, or you have to have an assistant director or a co-assistant director that is just focused on making sure that the teachers have the resources to produce quality and have the support, because we all know that what happens in a classroom every day, is not always easy or the same. I mean, I always think one of the hardest things about getting accredited was getting all of the toddlers, you know, hands washed and sitting at tables and food served before they started cross-contaminating.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so you have to role model that, or you have to have somebody on your team. If you're more of the business end, somebody on your team has to own that. And again, you have to coach to it. You can't just train to it. Training is one thing, but most of us don't always get everything the first time out. And so then you have to coach. And then part of it is, I always think about the Montessori method that I learned years ago when I first went to work in childcare. And it was a company that was not Montessori schools, but they were Montessori based. And it's that theory that, I'm going to tell you how to do this, then I'm going to show you how to do it, and then I'm going to ask you to show me.
Hmm.
And I think that adult learners do well with that too. And so that's a practice, that I always put into place, because just telling people what to do, and then of course having your lead teachers teaching them to be the coach. The leader
Yeah.
teaches the lead teacher to be the coach, so that
Yeah.
there can be continuous coaching in a classroom. Because one of the things I see happening in the industry right now is that there is more turnover in the part-time and teacher assistant positions. And if you do not have the support of the lead teacher, not just in the training role, but in the coaching role, and
Yeah.
making sure that the leads know their responsibility, and making sure that the teachers that are and the teacher assistants that are working under them know that that's what they're there for, to lead them to success.
Yeah, and I think when you're a good leader, you want to grow your team, and so when you give everybody a little piece of that, it helps people move to that next level in the career ladders, because that lead teacher in 5 years could be your new director, right? So I
Right.
think this is how you move people through that career ladders, and that also helps people want to stay, because again, they want to be part of the bigger picture, and they also want to see, like, when you take them in for one-on-ones and you say, where do you see yourself in 2 years or 5 years? You want to make sure they see themselves in your company, right? Because that's what helps with that
Build your bench.
turnover. Yeah,
Build your bench.
absolutely. And I think the other thing, when you were talking about, quality rating systems, I think right now, and I'm going to speak to the owners a little bit, some of the owners feel a little beat down after the last few years because they've been really tough years. I feel like when you look at your quality initiatives, one, many states are giving funding towards moving through higher levels of quality, whether it's through staff training, whether it's materials, depending on your state. But I think even bigger than that, it can help you really reignite your passion and kind of reconnect with the why you started in the first place. Because I feel like maybe for some folks it's gotten lost. I mean, burnout is a real thing right now that providers are facing, especially like as you said, with the staff turnover. 90% of the time it's your admin team or your lead teachers that are kind of picking up that slack. And so this might be a way to kind of reunite everybody to that, again, as you said, that vision, that mission, the goals of why we are here. It's more than just checking in and checking out. So those are great points. And I think too, we are in New England. We have 4 visits a year. I'm up in New England, and I love that in a part of the country that takes what we do very seriously, and our standards are pretty high here. So I'm actually proud of that. I think it's something that is expected here, is to have high quality. Go ahead. Did you want to say
Well, I
something on
was
that?
just going to say, I've heard conversations where people, are talking about, maybe licensing regulations should be reduced because of some of the circumstances in today's work environment. And I adamantly am not for that, because I worked predominantly in the South. The South has, in fact, there were times we had to come above, we couldn't run some of the ratios that they
Yeah.
wanted us to run. I was in a state where they wanted 1 to 6 infants. Well, under no
way.
circumstances could I do that.
Yeah.
Another state, 11 2-year-olds. Can you imagine?
No.
And I no, it's not even
Yeah.
imaginable. And,
Yeah.
I had to work to, get a higher labor percent to work with. But it also helped me because those states had quality ratings initiatives, and I had to spend a little money to get there. But once I met the higher levels, then it became more affordable, and it didn't put because we were getting higher reimbursements, and it didn't
Sure.
put my program at risk when I was knowingly running lower ratios.
Yeah. And so thank you for bringing, oh, sorry about that. We're across from a fire station.
Right.
So yes, that's a great point too, because that also happens here in Rhode Island, as we're a 4-star program. In our state, you can get as high as 5. But yeah, so we get a higher reimbursement rate, which allows us to pay our teachers at a higher rate, and then also obviously maintain those ratios. But I had a staff member who moved from here to South Carolina, and she started working in a room, and she was blown away by the difference in the ratio. She's like, oh my God. And the age mixes that they could do and things like that. So, I think quality is research based. And so the research tells you, what is a safe amount of children that one person can really tend to and do all the things that are expected in a high quality program. So that leads us to ongoing training. So I know your organization provides some webinars, but let's talk about the importance of ongoing training and professional development to help foster a culture of continuous improvement.
Well, I think that it's critical, and it's very critical to keep everyone learning, including the director, the assistant director. I'm even a big believer in keeping the cook learning, because regardless of what position we have, we're all working with children. And I think that most states require some type of professional development yearly. However, most are very lenient. You can count, just regular teacher meetings, which I'm not opposed to, but I really want to make sure I really wanted to make sure in working with my teams that they were professional development plans that fit the individual, because everybody's at a different time and place.
Mm-hmm.
And so actually, sitting down and saying, what is it that you feel you need to learn, sitting down with your staff to do the job that you would be proud of and feel like you have accomplished the goal of high quality early care and education. And that opens that conversation. And that conversation, can lead to the director or the assistant director, the program director, because we have all kinds of names in this industry, to say, okay, well, that's a good idea. And then have you thought about, there are some professional development trainings about, outside play and how to, really the environment and activities when you're outdoors. I noticed that that's something you could use more information about. So you build a plan together, and then you help them identify what's available. Because a lot of states have a lot of free courses that individuals can take. There's a lot of great training platforms now that can help people work towards a CDA. And on those platforms, you can look, there's a broad range of topics that will get you to being able to apply for that credential. And, you start with what they need to know more about first. But I really believe planning professional development and making sure the plan meets the individual.
Yeah. So I love that you brought up CDA, our episode that was just released today was about the CDA actually. And you know what I found? I have 4 or 5 girls that are going through the CDA right now. And what I found when they started putting their professional development into their resource finder, they started to discover that they were really heavy in some areas. And then other areas like, oh my gosh, I haven't taken anything around this, because we tend to take things that we like or that we're comfortable. And so when you put together that resource finder, you start to uncover areas that you're lacking without even realizing that you're lacking in those. Professionalism was one that I felt like a lot of the girls didn't take a lot of courses on. There was certainly lots around language and literacy and music and those types of things. I think the other thing too, when you start picking your professional development, is you want to take things that help people cross train. Because I really am a big advocate for moving people and growing people in my program. And sometimes people get really nervous, especially childcare owners. They're nervous that they're going to grow people out of their program. I can't tell you how many people I've grown out of my program, and I'm proud of that, right? I'm not just fostering children to be leaders, but my teachers as well, right? And so I think that's important. And so that's something I want people to take note of. So, and you're right, there's a lot of great platforms. I can remember not that long ago that we used to have to go in person to this place called Childspan. It's not open anymore, but we used to have to drive. And I remember in the winter, having to drive up for a 2-hour course. It was in Pawtucket, 8 cities over. Yeah. So now, I'm like, you guys are so lucky. You get throw on some pajamas, some nice music, get a cup of tea and do a PD, right at home. So, it really is right at your fingertips, and the world of virtual has made things so easy. So there's really not any excuses. So one of the things I thought was really interesting during that accreditation process and quality improvement process, because a lot of times they look very similar, and some of the things that they have you guide through, again, it's based on best practice and research, not things that people make up. So
I
would like
the way you said that.
well, we keep it very real here. I think one of the things that I really loved was gathering feedback from the parents, the staff, and the children to help identify the areas of improvement in our program. Talk about that a little bit, like in your experience, how directors can use that information. I know from my own personal experience, but I'd love to hear your thoughts about it.
Well, I think that, you have to be open to getting feedback to people think about certain aspects of your program. And I know surveying is part of the surveying staff and parents is part of the accreditation process at the beginning. And I'm not sure all accrediting bodies do it, but I do know of 2 that I've used that do it. And it kind of gives you a starting point from their perspective. I always think about communication, because communication can really break down, in a large child care center, especially. And I had some that were over 200. And so, so I always noticed that when surveys first came in at the beginning, because you do it at the beginning and then you do it at the end, it was people didn't feel like they were hearing enough about their child. They didn't, and the teachers felt like management, they were the last to know what they needed to know. And then the director would be so surprised. But you do have to learn to look through the eyes of other people, and you have to learn how to use that information. And again, going back to, especially the staff, okay, these were the results. And I'm not talking about individual results, but compiling them. So I need to know from your perspective, how do we improve, this area, because we scored low.
Yeah.
And, the scoring came from you. So that's meaningful.
Yeah. And I say things on the show that make people upset, but I feel like it's important to keep things honest. So the more that you're on the floor, as you alluded to earlier, and the more that you're coaching and having conversations with your staff on a regular basis, you will become less surprised with the responses, because you'll already be in tune with a lot of what's going on in your center. The more time you spend off site, or in your office, you're going to become disconnected. And you're right about having large programs or multiple locations. That also can be a challenge. At one point, I had 6 centers. For me, and again, everybody has their own whys. For me, it became too much, but not because of not being able to do it, but the things that were important to me as an owner, being able to know my staff, know my children, know my families, being really truly connected, it starts to get diluted the more centers you have, and nobody's going to convince me otherwise, because I'm just set in
It's
what I
okay.
know. It's
It's
what I know.
okay.
It's what I know. And we're just going to be honest, right? So I find that if you do have a smaller center, and it doesn't have to be super small, but a smaller center, it is a little bit easier to navigate quality ratings. It's a little bit easier to keep that communication because you're talking to those people all the time. A team of 8, it looks different than a team of 42 or 105, right? You have a team of 8 or 10, you're going to know those people in and out, for good or bad, good or bad, but you're going to know them, right? And you're going to have that connection. So I think it's really important. And I loved getting feedback. If you're a real leader, I feel like I looked for the negative feedback. I didn't want the good feedback I gave to the teachers. Here you go. Here's all the great things. I wanted the negative stuff because I wanted to I really wanted to grow. And that's the only way you can do that. You can only grow with that information. And so I found of all the things as we went through accreditation, I found that more helpful than collecting, this document and that document and putting everything so they can, see all the different things, where's your newsletters? And to me, that was like, it wasn't
That's
very
the easy part.
It is easy, and it wasn't very for me. It wasn't.
In accreditation, there's people and paper.
Yeah.
And the paper part is the easy part.
Yes.
The
Yeah.
people
To
part
me,
is
that
the
wasn't
hard
joy.
part.
Yeah. That wasn't life changing for me. It was like, okay, here they are, here they are, here they are. But yeah, the people part was great. And I really, really loved involving the children, as I had said earlier, because we had school age children. And so they were very much able to articulate what materials they wanted, what clubs they wanted, what snacks. Oh, they loved to tell me the snacks they wanted. And I loved that. And they loved being asked, and they loved being valued. So, when we talk about that, creating that culture, that does include your children, right? And you might have, obviously,
absolutely.
infants and toddlers maybe not be able to tell you, but those pre-K kids can tell you whether they like animal cracker A or B.
Oh, they're
You
highly opinionated about their
They
food.
absolutely are.
Well, and we all do better sometimes when we are part of decision making and we get to make choice, and
Yeah.
and that we don't lock everybody into the same behavior and the same choices and the same opportunities.
Yeah. So, sometimes right now, as we had talked about burnout, how do childcare directors implement and encourage staff to buy in? Because some staff are like, I don't want to take on more. You want me to do more? Like, how can we get them? What strategies would you say we can get them to really want to participate? Because, and I know, going through a quality rating or accreditation is a lot of work. I mean, we talk about it like, it's not, but it is a lot of work.
It
So
is.
what would,
Sometimes you got to change bad habits, and
yeah.
maybe it's not changing as much as it is tweaking. I can
Okay.
give you an example.
Yeah.
In any CPA accreditation, and this I don't remember this about NAEYC, and I don't know why, but in any CPA, you have to use a burp cloth for when you're feeding a baby, or something to keep the baby from
Vomit off your body.
on your clothes, and then passing that on to another child, and you have to put a clean one on every time. Teachers sometimes would just get in a hurry, because there were so many things happening in the room.
Sure.
And they would forget that. And so those are little things, but they're really important to the health of the children and the staff.
Yeah.
And so for me, it was always about saying, okay, look, this is, a requirement, but it's a good requirement. It may not be in licensing, but it's in accreditation or QRIS.
Yeah.
And this is something to keep you and the baby, healthy, but mainly the babies, because they're going to transfer germs anyway, and we don't want to, do anything to expedite that or make it worse. And so where do you think we can put the burp cloths so that the clean burp cloths, so they're easily accessible to you? Because that's one, sometimes it's just sitting down and saying, okay, what would make this doable for you? I do think there's a saying I heard years ago that it was good business is built on one conversation at a time. And I think that we underestimate the value of maybe a 3 to 5 minute conversation or coaching with the teachers instead of just going in and saying, you got to have a burp cloth or we won't get accredited.
Yeah.
And then two, teaching them how to help each other, because typically very often there's, two teachers, a lead and a teacher working together. And that was something I really had to teach a lot of people, is that on occasion, when we would have accreditation visits, on a few occasions, we didn't make the first pass. We had to do it again. But I always celebrated how far we came.
Yeah.
But and in one instance, I remember that one of the afternoon teachers who was not as experienced forgot to, and this is a big one to me, wash her hands twice after a big diaper change.
Yeah.
And so I asked the lead teacher, I said, did you by some chance notice was happening? Like she finished the change, didn't wash, went and picked up another bag. And she said, I did, but I didn't want to say anything because I thought that was, going to be a problem while I was being observed. I said, no, I said, it would have been really great if you had reminded her, because
Yeah.
I said that demonstrates teamwork and
And support. Yeah.
and that's part of the process, because we are all human beings.
Yeah, and she could have just went in and said, I know you're nervous and you're not used to having people watch you with a clipboard. I know it's nervous, but the protocol in our room is X, Y,
Right.
Z. Right.
So
Yeah.
I don't know. I wish it was simple communication, and not just like meeting communication, and not just, notes or newsletters to your staff. And again, if you are the business leader of your center, and it's, one that you can't manage both jobs well, then you have to have a co-director or an assistant director or a program director, and making sure that those individuals spend enough time in classrooms building the confidence, the knowledge and the confidence of teachers.
Cindy, I love that. Can you just repeat one more time? Where should we be spending our time?
In the
Please say it again.
in the classrooms, building the confidence and the knowledge of the individuals. And I think sometimes our turnover, has to do, and this isn't always, there's a lot of variables out there in turnover, but has to do with the fact that we forget, we're working in torque speed as leaders, and we have to slow it down sometimes to help people get through. Years ago, I had a young lady that I was a district manager of 8 schools. That was my favorite job, by the way. And she had started work. This young lady started working. Her name was Donna, in one of my centers as a teacher assistant in the pre-K classroom. And it was a bit of a hectic day. And we needed a new teacher assistant that could really, gel with the lead. And I was there. And I sat down and talked with her after the children laid down, and just, gave her some words of wisdom and gave her some encouragement. And so did the lead teacher and the director, about every day gets easier. And if it doesn't, let us know, because then we're failing you. No, she told me she worked in the same center. She went on to get her CDA and worked in the same center for 30 years.
I love that.
And she told me, I retired before she did. She told me that me telling her that things would get easier, and if they didn't, to let us know each day, because then we weren't doing our jobs. And she said, you are the reason I stayed past the second day.
Yep.
And I was just like,
I love that.
Oh my gosh. But, I learned a long time ago, I can't watch all these children by myself. And I took this job, and, I could leave it, but I don't want to. So, and I wanted to treat people like I wanted to be treated. And I will tell you, I was, and I think there's value in this. When I went to work as a 3-hour-a-day preschool teacher in a school or a center, the lady that hired me was the director, and it was a center for about 90 children. She had a pretty long-term staff. Me and one other person were new. And this was before CDAs. It was before professional development. But the company was Montessori based. So we had all these Montessori materials. We had books to read, and we had all the centers. And I can remember the lady that she introduced me to, her first and last name 44 years ago, that was the person she put in charge of mentoring me as a lead teacher. And I
Wow.
always think she was a person before her time,
Yeah.
because I used to see that be a big miss. But if it hadn't been for my director introducing me to the lead teacher that she had already trained to be that mentor and to help me learn, because I had to learn how to use a ditto machine. Do you know what a ditto machine is?
I do.
Yeah.
I
Well,
do.
I'm almost 70. I'm pushing 70s. It's like I would have, and of course back then we didn't know dittos were bad.
Yeah.
Yeah. Once we learned they were not the way to go.
Yeah.
Yeah, we got, we didn't need a ditto machine anymore.
Yeah.
She also taught me how to use every Montessori workshop, because we called the activities in the Montessori area were workshops.
Yeah.
And she taught me how to use every one of them. And that's where I learned, I will tell you, I will show you, and then you will show me.
Yeah. So, Cindy, I could talk to you forever. This is a wonderful conversation. Before we wrap it up, is there anything that I didn't ask you that you would really love to leave with the listeners?
I always like to leave with them that before you give up, talk to somebody, because if you came into this and you entered it because you really, really wanted to be and work with children, but you are frustrated due to a lot of circumstances, maybe in your work environment or even outside of work, that make it difficult, don't just up and give up.
Don't leave.
Yes. Talk to somebody.
Yeah.
Talk to your director. Talk to the friendliest face in the building, because I know that people sometimes think they have to give up. Think about the lady I just told the story, that one small conversation with her and one sentence of encouragement, and it opened the door for her to be able to ask questions, versus just like thinking, oh, I'm not cut out for this.
Yeah. That's a golden nugget for sure, Cindy, especially with all the staff turnover that folks are dealing with. So
And
thank
I'd
you.
like to say to all those people that have been out there for a while, don't forget to welcome the newcomers.
Yes.
And help them, and don't expect them to know everything right up front.
Cindy, that's great advice too. Thank you so very much. So to our listeners, please share, like, follow, subscribe if you're watching to us on YouTube. Also remember, it is the little things, the little details that you put into your center every day that make the biggest impact. So
Talking with you, likewise, I can talk with you. I can tell that Rhode Island is blessed to have you in some of their centers. And
thank you, Cindy.
Well, all the cute little kiddos have been picked up, and it's time to go home. And that'll do it for another episode of the Childcare Director's Chair. Please leave a review so Erica knows the information is helping you to manage and improve your childcare centers. Remember to subscribe to get the latest episode from Erica's Childcare Director's Chair.